Down adversity to strength, I'm joined by Dale Atkinson. For nearly 2 decades, Dale worked at senior level in compliance and governance for major financial institutions, including HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Wellington Management, and Schroders. His career was built around system, risk, responsibility, and trust. Then in October 2024, everything changed when Dale was diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer. He was told it was inoperable, incurable, and that he may have less than a year to live. Suddenly, Dale found himself on the other side of a system he had spent his career trying to strengthen. This time it was healthcare. His experience was a patient exposed to communication failures, gaps in consent, the difference between the care organisations believe they provide and what patients actually experience. In this episode, Dale shares the reality of receiving terminal diagnosis, undergoing treatment, living with uncertainty, and trying to build a future for himself and his family while facing the possibility that time may be limited. We also discuss patient advocacy, trust in healthcare, resilience, identity, and while Dale acquired a health and recovery business while sitting in a chemotherapy chair. This is a powerful and honest conversation about mortality, purpose, family, and choosing to keep building life even when the future is uncertain. Dale, absolutely great to see you on the podcast finally. How you doing?
Well, thank you for having me, Lee. We've tried to get here a few times, but I'm really glad we're finally here, and it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and hello to everyone listening.
Yeah, thank you. All good things and everything, because you've been due to come on for such a long time there, so I'm glad that the wait's finally over. Crazy story of your life, though. Life's all good, and as we know, things can just happen. But I always say at the start of every interview, take us back to the beginning of your journey. Where did it start? So for you, is it 2024 or does it go back further?
So it actually goes back a lot further. And if it's okay with you, I'll give a little bit of bit of extra sort of detail.
Yeah.
So I'd actually left my roles in finance. I had just started my own firm. I was off working on behalf of a reserve bank for a different country, investigating their former president and all sorts of weird and wonderful things in this world. And then before my diagnosis, although I'd had a bit of a lead up and I'll get to that in a second, but before my diagnosis, it was actually my partner. So in the summer of 2024, she had a funny turn. We had a 9-month-old little boy, or just over 6 months, roughly, depending on what the timeline is. I can't remember these days.
Yeah.
A very little boy. And my partner had a funny turn one day. We rang 111, which is the non-emergency line here in the UK. And they sent an ambulance pretty quickly. They thought she was having a heart attack. So they came, picked her up, checked her, took her to hospital, ran some tests, and just by sort of pure chance, by, kismet, whatever you want to call it, karma, somebody decided to do an x-ray. And on that x-ray, they found a small lump in her lung. Roll forward another couple of months and they'd done some investigations. They unfortunately couldn't biopsy it because it was right in the middle of the lung and they'd have to puncture the lung and all these sorts of things, and it was too difficult. So they elected to do a full lobectomy. So on the 3rd of October 2024, my partner went into St. Guy's in London and had the entire upper right lobe of her lung removed. And it turned out, because we didn't fully know at that point it was definitely cancer, it turned out it was. She had a lung carcinoma, quite a nasty, aggressive looking lung carcinoma. Very thankfully, they got it, and, they got a very large margin around it because they took the entire lobe, and therefore she was classed as surgically cured. She then comes home on the 5th of October, and there's me. I'd been suffering for a long time at this point. I'd been going to the doctor since I moved back from the Channel Islands to the UK back in about 2017. And I kept being met with, because I was in my late 20s at that point in time, I get met with the same line all the time. You should stop drinking so much. It's your lifestyle. You're obviously stressed. You've got a high-powered job. You're working too much. Nobody took me seriously. They did not want to listen to me at very most, and it was only 1 or 2 doctors who even did this. They gave me what are called PPIs, protein pump inhibitors, and those essentially lower your stomach acid, and they thought it was just too much stomach acid caused by heavy living. Now, I should point out that I had played a lot of rugby in my past. I'm 6'3". I was about 100 to 120-ish kilos. I had a gym in my apartment building and a pool in my apartment building. I was very lucky. And I was relatively fit at that point in time. I wasn't living that crazy a lifestyle to have sort of some of these issues. And it just kept snowballing and getting worse and worse and worse. And I went from a bit of heartburn to waking up in the middle of the night choking on stomach acid, to then starting to get shooting pains in my shoulder and through my neck. We now know since that it was a nearly 10 centimeter tumor pressing up against the same nerve cluster that you get tweaked when you have a heart attack or angina. So I was living with the pain of a heart attack 24/7, which was fantastic fun. But yeah, that had been rolling on for a good few years by the time that I went to my now local GP. And after taking me for blood tests and, samples and all this kind of stuff, he finally went, look, you've been pretty persistent about this. Let's escalate it. He said, it's not going to be nothing urgent. It's just going to be a stomach ulcer. It's just going to be a this or a this or a this. And he hadn't put together the pain plus the stomach acid plus digestive issues, plus a few other bits and pieces. He didn't put them all together in one. He thought they were all separate things. He thought the shoulder was I'd hurt it picking up my kids. He thought the stomach acid was an ulcer. He thought the gut problems were just bad eating because of the ulcer or undigested food caused by the ulcer, etc. So he didn't put it on an urgent pathway or anything. It took until September in 2024 when I got a phone call from a gastroenterologist, a young guy who'd picked up my file and started asking me a couple of questions. He said, so I can see you're in pain. I can see you've lost a little bit of weight here as well. And I was like, well, since then, I've lost about 40 or 50 kilos. And he went, okay, so I'm putting you on a fast track. We're doing this urgently. I'm going to get you in like 2 weeks' time. I was like, I'm really sorry, I can't come in then. My other half's actually going to be in hospital having a lobectomy. So pushed it back by a few days. And it just so happened it was going to be on my youngest son's first birthday on the 15th of October, 2024. And yeah, my partner, because she was still recovering, couldn't drive me, etc. So I went in, had this endoscopy where I was told it was probably nothing and don't worry about it. It's going to be nothing serious at all. Wasn't knocked out for it, which is the standard. They normally put you under a local or a general anesthetic. I never know which way around that goes. They put you under anesthetic, knocks you out, and they do it because it's a really uncomfortable, really unpleasant thing to have a 1 inch thick camera put down your throat and your whole gag reflex is just going constantly. So for me, they gave me a numbing spray and I will never forget the taste of rancid banana, which is what it tasted like. And I hate banana anyway. It's not nice. And suddenly there it was, middle of the screen. They couldn't really do anything or say anything. The whole room went silent. And the doctor who was doing the endoscopy sort of went, it's a large cancerous lump, it's this and this, as she was describing it to her team. It's calcified, it's obstructing the entrance to the stomach, it appears very large, very aggressive, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the endoscopy, once the camera was out, etc., she sat me down and said, look, I'm really sorry, this isn't normally my position to do this. Normally, you'd be referred to an oncologist and through an MDT team and all these other things. She said, but you saw it on the screen and you heard me talking about it, so I'm not going to lie to you. I'm almost certain it's cancer and it's very large. It's very aggressive looking. I'm putting you through as like an urgent case. And I went, okay. Went and spent 10 minutes sat in the waiting room on my own, trying to work out what to go home and say. And yeah, got in the car, went home and spent the evening blowing out candles for my little boy's first birthday.
Yeah, in a daze, I would imagine.
A little bit, yeah. I think that's an understatement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's everyone's worst nightmare for that as well. I mean, I dread to think the emotions you were going through, literally mixed, none at all, numbness. I mean, how'd you say that to your wife? Bearing in mind what she's going through.
Yeah, so very thankfully for us, my in-laws had come across. They're based in the US, were based in the US. They've just moved down to Mexico. So my other half is Mexican-American by background. Her parents had flown across to give us a hand with the kids because I was working heavily, launching my business, etc. My partner had been in hospital and they were here. And thankfully, they gave us a little bit of support and they took the kids over for about 24 hours. And Anna and I sort of just disappeared and talked and worked things out. So it was kind of okay on that front. We have a very, very honest relationship, like brutally, brutally honest. And therefore, it wasn't really, I don't know, I don't think it had all kicked in at that point. I think I was in so much shock that it hadn't really landed. And then to make things even worse, a few days later, so me and my mum hadn't been on the best of terms. And I sort of messaged her and said, look, I've got something really serious to tell you. I drove down on Thursday afternoon to go and tell her and told her in person, look, I've got cancer. I don't know what sort yet. I don't know just how bad, but they've said it's aggressive. They said it's this, and this. It's kind of roughly here. I think it's either stomach or esophagus. I don't really know. And my mum had sadly been been suffering from a long-term health issue herself. She had an immune disease. And then the Sunday night, which was also very coincidentally the night before our eldest little boy's third birthday, sadly, she passed away. Very ironically, she was also a palliative care nurse for her entire career. So we found out on the Monday morning on my eldest little boy's third birthday. And then the reason I mention this is because that Thursday was then when I went in. So 3 days after I found out about my mum's death was then when I went in to meet the surgeon. It was actually not an oncologist at that point, who turned around and told me, look, I'm so sorry. It's esophageal cancer. It's an esophageal adenocarcinoma. It's terminal. It's, stage 4, nothing we can really do. We're going to be assessing your options, but as it stands, it's inoperable, incurable. I'm so sorry to have to tell you this. Shook my hand and that was it. Was in there for less than 2 or 3 minutes. So I went home with the weight of not just one cancer, but 2, with 2 little boys at age 1 and 3 years old, just planning my mother's funeral and in a complete and utter state of shock as to what was going on, why and how we'd ended up in this just insane position.
If somebody said, right, we need to write a movie, let's build a character and let's give him loads of shit, and they did your list, people go, that's too much, nobody's going to believe it.
Yeah.
Why don't we throw someone else on top? We not got enough already? It's just,
Well, if it helps, there were various other things thrown on top of that too. So I had a multi-million-pound deal going through for my business that was sort of going to make our future. Yeah. We were just about to start hiring over 100 staff. It was with a massive retail bank in the UK, and I was due to sign it a couple of days afterwards, and I had to drop the whole thing. And then atop that, we also had a Great Dane puppy. And no sooner had I been diagnosed as, hospital visit after hospital visit. And by puppy, I mean he was 70 kilos. He was a nearly 2-year-old puppy. Yeah, he's a Great Dane. He's not a little boy. So we had to take him back to the breeder as well. And we took him back on his second birthday on the 7th of November. So all in the space of, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, our entire lives just crumbled. Everything just disappeared.
You must have been thinking, what's next? Or were you almost at a point where you're so numb to it that it doesn't matter what's next, kind of?
To be honest with you, I never really got numb. I got angry. And instead of letting it defeat me and beat me and sort of sit on top of me, I've always been one to turn anger into something. So I did, and I used it as my fuel.
With your, the easiest thing in the world, obviously as a therapist, I deal with clients with anger all the time there. And when anything happens, even if it's illogical, we always look for someone to blame. Did you look for anyone to blame? Because you could easily have gone back to doctors and going back a few years. Why didn't you do this? You could... did you do anything like that? Or
yeah, I think you inevitably do. I think I went through a cycle of, first of all, stages of grief that you kind of go through. And I think it was grieving for my life. And I blamed everyone. I blamed everything. I blamed myself for not driving myself to the doctor more often. I went something like 23 times over the course of 6 or 7 years. So it's not like I didn't really go enough, and I know that now, but I blamed myself. I blamed my partner for not telling me to go more often. I blamed my mum because she was a nurse for not noticing. I blamed everyone for everything, but it didn't last very long. I spent maybe 2 or 3 days just wallowing in that sort of anger of self-pity and self-loathing, as it were. And then I decided that anger was better placed doing something else. And
I know you said you've always been like that, but that's still not easy to do. Take that. And was it like your personality, or did you sit there thinking, enough of this, I'm going to try and channel this in a different direction? How did that happen?
It was a bit of a mixture of all of them, to be honest with you, Lee. It wasn't really any one thing. It's so adversity. I have no degree, no formal qualification. I was, back in my youth, I was a doorman and I worked for a scrap metal company for a while. And then I got into banking and I became extremely successful, quite young, despite having it against me. And everyone else around me was a lawyer, an accountant. They all had masters and MBAs and all things. And there was little old me, the former doorman, who had none of it, who had to work twice as hard, who had to just fight my way through it all to be seen, to be noticed, to be better than everyone else. And I took that along with the skill set that I'd learned through my career, which was very much investigation, interpreting things that are written in very sort of obscure language. So I did a lot with, legal compliance, looking at legal documents, looking at regulations and laws and interpreting them. I did a lot of data analysis as well. So looking through, millions and millions of transactions, trying to find a fraudster and all this kind of stuff. And it was the mixture of the skill set plus my ability to keep my anger in check and my ability to use it as a source of fuel, and my ability to accept what was going on, but not let it break me and defeat me, which I think is a learned behavior from my parents who both faced massive adversity in their life.
Even manage that, because acceptance is the hardest thing, and I say that to clients, whether it's for myself personally or I'm saying it to clients, that if you can accept something, it will kind of set you free. But that's the hardest thing to do, is acceptance, especially with your circumstances. Who wants to accept that?
I think, to be honest with you, the fact that I'd been suffering with it for so long, the acceptance came through the fact that I now had an answer as to what it was. And I think it was more the relief of knowing what it was that gave me a way to accept it than anything else. I don't think I was that destroyed by the actual diagnosis itself, because at least now I had an answer. I had information to start and to build on. And I've always seen things that way. I've always seen it as the more information I have, the better the choices I can make. And no matter the situation I'm in, I will always find a way to fight it. And I will always find a way to piece together the best plan I possibly can. So that's what I did.
You make it sound so straightforward.
Well, I've got to distill it down slightly for a podcast. How long have you got? Next 3 hours?
Yeah. But for a lot of people, no matter, they're not going to be able to get to that point. I think, you know, there's a set of circumstances. You're saying you've got parents there that you took things from there as well in order to get to that place, because it's just so much for a lot of people. They're going to find it too overwhelming. They're just going to get swept away with it. So to be able to put that down and go, actually, you know what, let's compartmentalize it. Let's see what we can do.
I don't think I quite did that either. I think, to be honest with you, because I had two very young boys, the fact that I'd lost my mother at that exact point in time as well, and I was experiencing the grief and the pain of losing a parent, that actually it didn't allow me to compartmentalize it. It made it even more real, but that then also kicked me out of my ability to just self-insulate. You know, because I wanted to just crawl into bed and forget the world existed, and just, you know, a little part of me thought, well, I just top myself kind of thing, because, well, it's better that I go on my terms than somebody else's. And if this thing's going to destroy me and have me bedbound and dying in a horrible, horrible way, as you see cancer patients on television, you know, I don't want that. So, you know, I went through all those considerations, and ultimately, I think it was the pain of my mother's death that really gave me permission to do something about this, weirdly. As very strange as that sounds to most people, it was experiencing that for myself and then realizing that my little boys would experience that if I didn't do something, and that if I just went and disappeared off of them, they would have no memories of me because they are so young, that they wouldn't have had a father figure in their life, that they wouldn't have anything of me. So I had a need to fight because of the pain itself and because of what I had experienced, and because the level I'd experienced it at, it broke that wall that a lot of people hit. The wall disappeared into the rearview mirror before I'd even had a chance to realize it was there.
Did you find that you were suddenly on some mission? Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I should probably preface this by, as I sit here now, I am no visible signs of disease. I have gone from a nearly 10 centimeter primary tumor. I've gone from being told I had less than 12 months to live. I, you know, had metastases. I had lymph nodes all over the place lit up. I had secondaries. I had all these things. As I sit here now, I have no visible signs of disease. I have had no surgery, but I did take chemotherapy and I did take immunotherapy. I did use what the system had available for me. Atop that, I took all of my skill set. I took all of my frustration and everything else. And very thankfully, my partner knows exactly what I'm like, so gave me the complete and utter permission to do what I needed to. And I disappeared into research, and I built my own custom GPTs to search out for certain bits of information. I read through somewhere between 4.5 and 5.5, maybe 6,000 research papers by hand myself. I read 30 odd books on cancer by people all across the world. I then, from that, started reaching out to the weird and wonderful parts of science that people call fringe. None of it's woo-woo, none of it's magic, none of it's all these things. But I reached out to the Thomas Seyfrieds of the world, and he's now famous for having been on the Diary of a CEO. He's a professor from Boston University who looks at the metabolic side of cancer. I reached out to and spoke to researchers such as the amazing Isabella Cooper at the University of Westminster in London. I spoke to world experts on, you know, metabolic focuses on cancer, on alternative and adjunct therapies, on hyperbaric oxygen, on genomic sequencing, on all these things and bits and pieces that at this moment in time aren't included in our standard of care, but are nonetheless evidenced, are real pieces of science, are based on some of them Nobel biology winning pieces of science in the case of metabolic theories on cancer, It's based on the Warburg effect, which won the Nobel Prize for biology back some 100 years ago nearly. These are known pieces of science that are used, and our PET scans that we use when they scan you for cancer, they feed you with radioactive sugar to see where the sugar goes. Because the majority of solid state tumors, like mine, big, solid, massive tumor, and you have solid state versus non-solid state, which is like a blood cancer. So lymphoma would be non-solid state. Mine was a solid state tumor, so it was likely to be glycolytic, and therefore they pump you with sugar to see where it goes. The NHS very weirdly then tells you that sugar and cancer have no correlation whatsoever, and go and eat as much sugar as you can because you need to get nice and plump ready for chemotherapy. Whereas the actual science says kind of the opposite, which is sugar is massive amounts of inflammation, not very good for you at all. Putting on lots of weight for chemotherapy and being massively inflamed is not the best idea, and actually you can utilize some of these as tools. Now, I'm not by any means saying that a keto diet or metabolic approaches can cure cancer, but what I am saying is there are a huge amount of tools out there that are verifiable, that are evidence-backed, and we're talking about things like mistletoe therapy, which is used across most of Europe. It's got phase 3 trial approval. It is able and legal to be used here in the UK. We just don't use it in our standard of care. There is a brilliant clinic out of Bristol called the National Centre for Integrative Medicine, who are, I think, the first and the biggest in the UK, who use this as a therapy for cancer and are seeing massive amounts of improved outcomes through it. And I came across a lot of these, started piecing together that plan. I then went ahead and did next generation sequencing. So I had the entire genome of my cancer mapped, looked at the individual pathways that it actually had available. So whether it was glycolytic, whether it was run on cortisol, the stress hormone, which mine was very heavily, whether it was adrenaline run, which mine also was, whether it was this, or this, whether it was fed by amino acids or the oxphos reaction, etc., etc. There's lots and lots of different potential feeders for cancer. And I got the science together, picked out exactly which pathways mine had, and then formulated a plan out of all the science that I had available to cover off as many of those pathways at once as possible. And the original plan was never to cure myself. I never thought this would be the outcome in any way, shape, or form. It was purely with the aim of living as long as I could for my little boys and not being that sickly, bedbound cancer patient for as long as I could possibly get away with. That was my only initial aims, because I was told very frankly to my face very early on that chemo would have me bedbound. That of the median survival was only about 8.5 months for esophageal cancer. I was given 11.5, and they told me I would probably spend, 6 to 9 months of that bedbound and sick and not able to hug my little boys, etc. So for me, that was the fight. It wasn't curing, it wasn't getting through this. It was being here, being able to hug them and play with them for as long as I possibly could. And I got lucky. I stacked so many things together. I couldn't tell you exactly what worked because I threw the kitchen sink at it and the taps and the soap and the whole of the kitchen and everything else in the whole house at it. But it worked.
It's like literally sending it out to the universe, literally. There's so much you're putting out there, yeah? Because a lot of people believe in it. I think it's Al McPherson did something similar, and she was diagnosed with cancer, and then that kind of went away on its own. How did you? I mean, what you've done, the research is unbelievable, and I've seen a lot of videos where they break cancer down as very straightforward and as a lot of ways it can be cured. But you then get into pharmaceutical conspiracy theories. They don't want to make
anybody who tells you cancer is simple and it can be cured is lying. It's a very, very difficult, very, very complex disease. It is no one singular thing. Every single cancer is different in the same way that every single human being is. They have so many different genetic markers and pieces to them. You cannot, and anybody who claims they can is selling snake oil. You cannot cure it in one singular way. It's about a personalized, integrative, highly, highly specialized approach, which is why my approach worked quite so well, because I stopped to understand that science and find the real specialists who could help me with it.
There's a couple of questions with that. First of all, when did you realise, with all the research you were doing, you thinking, actually, I'm getting somewhere?
So that happened quite quickly. So after my own research, I realised I needed a couple of specialists involved. So I got a brilliant lady called Dr. Isabella Cooper involved from the University of Westminster. I got a naturopath called Dr. Amanda King, or Amanda King Naturopathic Doctor, who she looked at my nutrition and looked at my overall sort of allopathic health So we made sure my body was in the best place to recover as well as just fighting the cancer. And then I brought in an integrative oncologist who had a specialization in off-label medications, and he's a brilliant guy. So he's called Dr. Hariharan Kuan, based out of Lucio Health, and he is honestly just incredible. And with the three of them, and I always try and put it in a business focus because that's the easiest way for me to think of it. I sat myself as the CEO of my healthcare journey. And along with my NHS oncologist, the three of those individuals as specialists ended up as my advisory team, as it were, as my board. And between us, they kind of fed in their specialisms, fed in their knowledge. And I then sat there and made the decisions based on that. And I went from January 2025, very roughly, was when everything sort of culminated and I started fully on my protocol, through to March, and my metastases had disappeared. In 3 months, my metastases had vanished and my tumor had dropped by about 15 to 20, maybe up to 30%. We'll never 100% know. And then by the end of the summer 2025, everything had vanished. And I was in a position where they could not explain it in the standard of care.
Could you feel the change? Could you feel yourself starting to heal? What was the difference?
So because my tumor was obstructive, it was sat at the junction between my esophagus and my stomach. It was basically like a massive ball, a massive plug sat in front of my stomach. Everything I ate, and at various points even water, was painful because it was pushing past this big, sore, calcified lump. And it had to like squeeze through about the width of a couple of hairs to get anything into my stomach. So that esophageal sort of wave of pushing food down was causing me so much pain that I'd be led on the floor. I'd be taking every pain medication you could imagine. They had me on pregabalin. I was on, begins with an M, whatever the really strong, morphine. I was on morphine for a while. I was on oxycodone for a while. I was on loads and loads and loads of pain medications, and they weren't helping. I was still writhing on the floor for an hour or two after a single meal every day, and it was hell. It really was. And then by the end of January 2025, I wasn't. And my doctor kept telling me, oh, it's just, it was psychosomatic. Obviously, just, the tumor's healed over slightly. It's probably grown and you just can't feel it because of that, or it started to breach its way out of your esophagus. It can't possibly be shrinking. And it was.
What did you think when they said to you, this is shrinking?
They didn't.
They didn't.
This is one of the fun parts of my journey is very early on, my NHS oncologist, and this probably speaks to exactly your mantra of adversity to strengthly. My oncologist very early on called me crazy and dangerous and stupid and lots of these fun words and threatened to pull my care. I sat down with her in my pre-chemo meeting because they have like a full briefing with you. They brought in a nutritionist and all this kind of stuff. And, well, first of all, the nutritionist turned around and told me that the best possible things for me to eat were ice cream and chocolate constantly going into chemotherapy. Yeah. Like it's a known thing in the NHS that going into chemo, they tell you to put weight on. And the best way to do that is, refined foods, highly ultra processed refined sugars. They told me to do that face to face. And they then turned around and said, okay, well, this is what we're thinking. This is the route we want to go down, etc. And I went, okay, well, if it's going to have me bedbound, as you're saying, if I'm not going to be able to hug my kids for 9 months out of the next 12 that you think I'm going to be alive. And FYI, the 11 and a half months was with systemic treatment. That's how long they thought I had with treatment, not pre-treatment, not without treatment. That's how long they thought I had in total. And I sat there and said, okay, well, in reality, I would like to use adjunct therapies, not alternative. I don't want to stop my standard of care. I want to use things alongside it. And I pointed out off-label medications. Now, I'm not talking horse meds and dog meds in most instances here, although I have used some of those, but human versions and tightly controlled and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And with specific mechanisms, and not to solve parasites, because that's all bollocks from Facebook groups that doesn't really exist. That's all conspiracy theory level. They, in fact, fight pathways and help to block certain enzymes and all sorts of things, nothing to do with parasites. I sat down and said, metformin, one of the most widely profiled drugs on earth, known to have anti-cancer effects. It has trial level evidence to show it works. And it comes with like a 36 to 37% increased survival rate. I pointed at aspirin. I was categorically told that I was going to kill myself quicker if I did those. Yeah, they then threatened to pull my care if I decided to continue down that route, and that if I decided to try and combine the two together, they would have to seriously consider whether they would allow me to have any form of chemo or immunotherapy at all, because they felt that it was going to interact with it and going to cause problems. And I said, well, in which case I won't have standard of care then. And I started getting up to leave sort of thing, and they said, no, don't worry, that's not quite what we meant. As if they were purposely calling my bluff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this happened multiple times to me. They threatened to pull my care if I continued. They outright called me dangerous, outright told me I was going to kill myself.
Hold on. Right, because my question I was going to ask, which you pretty much answered anyway, was how were you able to get the care that you wanted, especially if you're going through NHS? But if they're calling you dangerous just to yourself, bearing in mind that they give you like an expectancy of less than a year, and they're telling you dangerous.
Well, they also, one of the first things that came to my oncologist's mouth was, it's very dangerous to Google like that, And I was like, I'm a researcher for a living. I get paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a year in my career to research things, to find fraudsters, to find lies, to find misinformation. If anyone's going to be quite good at finding things online and finding the right information that isn't just conspiracy and isn't craziness, I think it might be me, thank you. And she barefaced looked me in the eye and kind of said, Googling at 2 a.m. is bad for everyone, and just moved on. And you're like,
one shoe fits all response to everything. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like me I've got like 50 clients trying to do the same therapy on every single one of them, and not understanding why they're getting annoyed because what I'm doing for them is not working.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, what would you say? It's arrogance from their part? Or they just literally standard, this is the only route we go. Does it save money? And that's it? I don't know.
So I think there's 3 different threads there. I think probably the most conspiracy of them, and we'll start with it because it's the most fun, is the fact that pharmaceutical companies do unfortunately have a big sway in this. And for things like metformin and aspirin, they are off-label. Nobody is going to earn any money whatsoever if a pharmaceutical company comes and does a trial and proves that it really works and puts it in place, because they're off label. They cost pennies, literally pennies. It costs like £86 a year to feed somebody metformin for the whole year. That's nothing compared to what the NHS spend on everything else. They want to keep plugging people full of other things because they're better for their bottom line. Of course they do.
My cynicism is for that one.
Well, that's part of it. That is a proven part of it. It's not just conspiracy. Unfortunately, it's true. And if you look down to the fact that like chemotherapy fails in like 52% of instances, now that's not just it doesn't work. That could be it doesn't work, or it's been slightly overprescribed, or it's given over such a long period that it stops working and the cancer adapts to it. There's various different reasons for it. But the known metric, and it's a published metric in ONS proper NH, is 52% of all chemotherapies fail. And part of the reason for that is that the system is set up to only give it by cancer phenotype. So if you have colon cancer or prostate cancer, you fit in this box and therefore you are due this chemotherapy. They don't go, well, actually, your genetics are set up to this and you have this difference in your gene that means that these other chemotherapies are actually going to be way more effective and won't be rejected by your body. And we have the science to do that. It's known science. It's on the 10-year cancer plan to do it. It's been around for a while, and you can build it into, it's called chemosensitivity testing, by the way, and you can build it into next generation sequencing and all these things that I did. And it's not expensive. It's like £600 to do chemosensitivity testing. One round of chemotherapy, the average, I think, is something like £12,000 to £15,000 per round. It's like £180,000 a year on average for a cancer patient for chemotherapy. What's better for the pharmaceutical company? Plugging everybody full of chemos, and if they fail, well, you move on to the next chemotherapy, and it's 180 grand a year per patient per every round they have, or every set they have, 15 grand per round kind of thing. Or a £600 test that says, actually, we can get rid of half of these, and, our bill goes down by 2/3. Sadly, that's the way the system has been set up, and it's being manipulated in certain ways, and systems, they haven't adapted to this. Sadly, it's a known thing. It sounds really conspiracy, but it is a very much known thing. You can see The Economist has reported on it and all sorts. And then there's 2 other sort of sides to this as well, how to work out how to sort of say this. So it sort of runs a little bit deeper in terms of it's the way the system is set up. The system has a protocol, and the protocol doesn't really flex. And I find myself saying that in a lot of instances at the moment. And what I mean by that is doctors are taught in a very specific way. They're taught, if you have this, you need to do this. And they are there to treat the symptoms. They're not there to treat the underlying issues. So when I looked at this and realized that cancer has a starting point, there are multiple different theories out there. There's a really interesting one by a guy called Mark Linton called the cancer resolution, which posits that mycotoxins are a factor in causing cancers. Now, with that, I mean everything from mold through to parasites, through to all sorts of other things, which is a little part of where the conspiracy around parasites has come from. If you have a really bad parasite, it can influence a cancer, absolutely, by all means. but in most instances, it has nothing to do with it at all. Molds, however, a lot of us have mold in our body caused by everyday things. Freeze-dried coffee in something like 70 odd % of instances, I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but it's a lot. It's more than 2/3 of instances has mold. It's a well-known thing. It's freeze-dried and then left out in open air, it gets mold and then it's packaged. And we ingest that, most of us ingest that on a pretty daily basis. Peanut butter is notorious for something called aflatoxin. Mold grows on peanuts and it's invisible. You can't see it, and therefore they don't know if it's there or not. So when they go and produce your peanut butter, well, they're not going to use the prettiest, nicest peanuts, are they? They're going to use the ones over in the corner that have been sat there for 3 weeks. And that's what happens. And there is a known link. I say a known link. There is a causal link. And it's slightly anecdotal at the moment because nobody has yet proved it. There has been no full trial to prove it. But the pathways, the evidence, and my journey in part as well, although be it I am a case of N=1, so I prove nothing. For any statisticians or doctors listening, I am very much N1. I claim that nothing worked, and I will never be able to prove what exactly worked. I don't need to at this point in time, not for my own edification anyway, but I want to find ways for other people to be able to prove this. So, sorry, going back to what I was saying. Yeah. There is a shown causal link with cancer. So there is 12 hallmarks of cancer. What's called the somatic genetic theory, which is general somatic theory, which is what the NHS currently run on, only explains 3 of them. And that posits the fact that a genetic mutation in your body causes cancer. So like a free radical goes crazy in your body and that, triggers something and that causes cancer. They can only find that happening in less than 10% of all cancers. Yeah. Happens in less than 10% of all cancers.
Over 90?
Yeah, nobody knows. It's why they can't cure cancer at the moment, is because nobody knows. They are positing now that some of it is caused by immune deficiencies and metabolic deficiency. But then Mark Linton's theory posits that, yes, those things absolutely exist in a cancer diagnosis and they are all part of it. So if you look at breast cancers caused by the BRCA gene or the BRAF2 gene, etc., or I can't remember which one's which, but caused by these genetic mutations. If it was going to be a genetic mutation that causes it, why don't all people with that genetic mutation get that breast cancer, get that testicular cancer, get that whichever cancer? There has to be an environmental element. There has to be an outside sparking factor to this. And what Mark has sort of found in his research, and he's not a doctor. He is an interested outside party and a statistician, I think he is, by background and trade. He basically started looking through the data and realizing that these people who get diagnosed with cancers, get diagnosed with especially genetic cancers and all these other bits, quite often also find that they have an underlying mold issue or they have an underlying other health condition that they haven't actually identified and they've never put the causal link in place for. And then my partner, as a result of this, went and had herself tested because she'd had cancer too. And she also had mold in her body. And it feels very coincidental that we both had mold and we both had cancer. And then we've gotten multiple friends to do the same, both in and outside of the cancer space. Only 1 or 2 outside of the cancer space had mold, and it was at much lower levels. But every single one of our cancer patient friends to date has had mold. Every single one. Yeah. Freeze-dried. So the dried stuff, the granuled stuff you buy, Kenco, Maxwell House.
The instant coffees.
Yeah.
Right. Because also you apparently can get cancer from a lot of sweeteners, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's all sorts of these things. There's loads and loads and loads that have mold in. Like, you wouldn't believe how bad the food system is at this moment in time in terms of looking after the consumer.
What foods would you say to somebody, right, avoid these, just avoid them?
In terms of the mold stuff, peanuts is a big one. Freeze-dried coffee is another one. Cereals, if you're going to buy them, they're junk anyway. They're highly processed crap food. If you're going to buy them, don't leave the packet open. Use it within a couple of days. And I think that's along those sorts of lines where you leave it open, consume it quickly.
Basically, because obviously a lot of people know that mold can kill and have an effect in different ways, but call it causing cancer.
And it affects the immune system and stuff as well. And that's the secondary side of this, is the mold then suppresses the immune system, and the immune system is what fights off cancer. And we all have a level of cancer in us at all points, because all cancer really is abnormal cells. And it's just our body, whether it can deal with it or not, whether it can detox them or not. And it comes down to how well it can do that, and that process is working, as to whether we end up with an advanced cancer or not. And if you have mold, well, potentially 1 or 2 things. One is it can cause inflammation and all these other things, which is then the sort of of starting point for a cancer, or alternatively, your body is too busy fighting the mold to pay attention to the cancer cells, and therefore the cancer proliferates and grows because it's busy dealing with that. Now, I'm not saying this is, 100% the cause in any way, shape, or form. It is just a theory. It is just a concept at this moment in time. And until the evidence is there, I'm not suggesting everybody go out and fill themselves with anti-mold drugs and all this kind of stuff. But I do think anyone out there who has an advanced cancer diagnosis should be aware that there is growing bodies of evidence, especially anecdotal side, that this could work. And for the sake of a pretty cheap test to test for it, I think I paid £60 to go and get mine tested and found this mold. If you do so, £60 to cure something that is the underlying cause for your cancer, then suddenly weakens your cancer, improves your immune system, improves your overall health, and therefore gives you a better chance to fight it. Well, surely 60 quid's worth it in the grand scheme of these sorts of things. Yeah.
It's just, people just don't know about it. So I think it's amazing what you're doing now. And tell us a little bit more about, because you've changed, you want to spread the word now.
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple of things now. So number one is I blog and post a lot online. So I put up a lot of my research. I'm starting to distill into blogs. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't been very good at blogging recently because I've had other health issues and all sorts going on. They've recently found my cortisol levels have dropped off. They think my body is being attacked by the immunotherapy itself. So the lots of people think it's the easy route. Sadly, it's caused me lots and lots of problems. And trying to deal with those at the moment, I've had to drop off of social media and all sorts for a little bit. But I will be back. I do post a lot and I post all sorts of interesting bits of science. All of it is evidence-based and I give all the citations, all of the research, all of the articles that I pull it all from so people can go and read for themselves. I'm not suggesting that mine is the only source of truth in any way, shape or form, or that it's all 100% perfect. None of it ever is, but it is the best I can find and the most interesting things out there I can find, and what I would want people what I wanted to look for when I was first diagnosed and didn't find, basically. And then atop that, I've also taken my finance information, my finance background, etc. And I've started to try and change things for patients using it. So using a lot of the tools that I designed to find money launderers, fraudsters, to investigate people, to build enterprise-wide risk assessments, all of these things. I've turned a lot of those tools on their heads. And I'm now using them to look from a patient perspective at healthcare businesses and to assess them for the level of trust that they actually purvey. That could be anything from looking at UX and user design, etc., through to whether they have complaints and all these other things. It just basically experiences a service instead of being from a clinician's point of view outwards, which is how most people look at things. A clinician provides a service and you go to them for that service and it's down to you whether you have it or not. Yeah. This flips that on its head and we look at a business from a patient perspective and say, okay, well, if you do this, this and this, and if you give people this information and change this and move like this and do this, or you put up a Doctify account so that they can review you and all this kind of stuff, then actually patients will feel more comfortable. And the second they walk through the door feeling more comfortable, but your actual outcome increases quite exponentially. The more confident and comfortable you feel with your practitioner in all realms, the better the outcome you get, because of the psychosomatic side of, well, if I'm happy, I feel better about the person in front of me and I experience their service better. And it could be the same clinician giving the same service to the same patient, but if one's happy and one's not when they walk through that door, if one's confident and thinks that this person is the best ever and one doesn't, well, they experience it completely differently. So we're helping clinicians to understand that and to quantify it and show them what it means in terms of revenue metrics. And then atop that, I'm also writing a book. And then atop that, there's also a couple of charities as well. So myself and a lady called Jane McClelland, who's a very famous author in this space as well, have started a charity called Beyond the Standard. And we are pushing the UK government to try and instigate change around the use of off-label medications and around the views on adjunct therapies. And what we really want is for them to create just a simple register. We want them to create a register to record what patients are actually doing so that some of this can become evidence and can then go on to inform real trials.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's so much you're doing. Thank you. It's so good. That's absolutely brilliant, because with a patient going to see a specialist, how often do they just take whatever they're told as gospel? Whatever they tell them, they go, okay, that's fine, and almost don't even question it. I get from a lot of people why they wouldn't question it. They probably haven't got the energy. They're assuming that's it. But I think who would have thought that your occupation was what saved your life and probably countless others in the future?
Yeah, I never would have thought it. Not from finance.
Yeah, so to be able to do it, and I can imagine that the amount of information you found was so much quicker than a lot of other people out there, and that's something you can spread and pass on for other people there.
Well, I mean, the one thing to note on that side, Lee, is for me, I happen to also be very lucky with the advent of AI coming just beforehand. And because I've got a relatively technical brain, I was able to sit and work out how to put in guardrails and stop AI from hallucinating. So I created AI tools to do a lot of this for me. And I would strongly suggest any patient out there listening, they don't need to create the same. They don't need to have the same technical expertise. AI's moved on in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But use AI as a researcher. Go and look for things, test it, take those to your doctor, ask questions, self-advocate, push things, be the problem patient, because those will give you a better chance of survival.
Yeah, being a problem patient might be the thing that keeps you alive. You're a problem patient, and they were doing everything they can for you to not be. The fact they're calling you a dangerous patient is literally going against what they're hoping that you're going to accept. You know, I think that's pretty amazing. Anyone listening to this, anyone that reads what you've put, speaks to you, will have a completely different perspective. I just think it's mind blowing. Not just listening to your story, but the information and how everything is, the way of the world, dealing with something like this is just insane. How's everything with your health now? Where are you at with your health at the moment?
Well, as we said before, so the end of last summer, I got no visible disease. Now, I'm one of those very silly people who decided to take that as a sign to go back to normal life. And tried to launch my own integrative health clinic and was working 16 hours a day. I brought on a doctor and nurses and all sorts and was looking for premises, going out to investors to try and get millions to sort it all and all this, and sadly wasn't paying enough attention to myself, and the cancer came back. So January, I was told it was back and it was advancing. By March 2026, it was vanished again because I stopped everything and started refocusing back on my health again. So as I stand here now, I'm waiting for a PET scan to confirm whether I officially have no cancer at all, whether I am NED, so no evidence of disease, which is the closest the NHS will ever give me to remission.
It comes back and it's negative again. What's going to be the difference this time? A lot less.
That I will be keeping up everything I was doing. So you probably can't see in the background, but I've got a boxing punch bag here. I've got an infrared sauna in my garden room. We built a full therapy center. I've got a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, red light panels, all these things that I now integrate into my day-to-day life. And I will no longer be working 16-hour days to try and get a clinic off the ground. I am instead focusing on my trust business and trying to work less than 6 hours a day, which is still a pretty decent work day in my world. For a terminal cancer patient, it's not so bad. But trying to work only 6 hours a day in order to be able to focus on all the other things I need to keep myself where I have to be.
I can see there's not enough hours in a day. So for you to be working 6 hours must be frustrating at the same time. But health first, that's all you got is your health. So, but yeah, everything you do and the team you got around you, it's just amazing. And I can't wait for updates on it, no doubt. It's been mind-blowing listening. I don't say that. I think you go through my other podcasts and I'll say that it's been amazing, be interesting, but it is generally mind blowing. And from the fact of where you were to the way you battled and fought all the way through it, with everything you've done, it's just phenomenal. I think it's inspiring.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Absolute genuine honor to have you on the podcast. Certainly well worth the wait.
Well, much appreciated, Lee. And I'm sorry we had to wait a little while. But one final thing to leave your readers with is all of this is distilled down to be in a podcast. There is a lot more science behind it all. If there's anything you genuinely want to hear about in terms of these, please do reach out. I'm very open. I'm not guarded. If you have questions, even if you want to poke a hole in something, I'm absolutely all ears. It's about open discussion, not about vilification, not about anger and picking sides.
And we'll have all of the links in the description there, all of your links, so people can click on everything and get to you and follow you and everything else there. But absolutely brilliant, Dale. Thank you so much.
Very much appreciated, Lee.
Thank you.